Hey everyone, in this video I'll be discussing why the 80s was the greatest decade for movies. I was talking to a friend recently and he was trying to tell me that the movies that came out in the 70s were better than the 80s, and I strongly disagree. But it did give me the idea for this video. Don't get me wrong, the 70s was a strong decade for films, with the birth of many iconic movie franchises like Star Wars, Rocky, The Godfather, but it can't compare to the roster of movies that came out during the 80s. Every year in this decade had multiple iconic movies, especially 84, which I think is the greatest movie year ever. Let's take a trip down memory lane and take a year-by-year look at some of the movies that came out in the 80s. The decade started off strong with the release of one of the most iconic films of all time and the second film in the Star Wars series, The Empire Strikes Back, which is widely recognized as the best Star Wars movie ever. But that wasn't the only rememberable movie from that year. Other movies from 80 were Airplane, Stir Crazy, Raging Bull, The Blues Brothers, along with one of the funniest films ever and one of the scariest, Caddyshack, and The Shining. Let's move on to 81, which is probably the least impressive film release year of the 80s. With that said, there were still some good movies that came out, like cult classic Stripes and Cannonball Run, along with the release of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was the first film in the Indiana Jones franchise. 1982 saw the release of one of the most iconic movies ever, with Steven Spielberg's E.T. This film captured the imagination of audiences like few films in history. E.T. was released in June of 82, and it remained in theaters for over a year, giving it one of the longest theatrical runs in cinema history. After its initial release, the movie beat out Star Wars to become the highest grossing movie in history, a title it held for 11 years until Steven Spielberg beat his own record in 93 with Jurassic Park. E.T. wasn't the only classic movie that came out in 82. That year gave movie lovers a lot of other options, like Rocky III, On Golden Pond, An Officer and a Gentleman, Porky's, cult classic Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Blade Runner, and the first installment of the Rambo series, First Blood. That brings us to 83, which includes another impressive list of films. Starting with The Outsiders, which launched the careers of several Hollywood A-listers. Risky Business, which was Tom Cruise's first leading role. Then we were introduced to one of the greatest movie characters of all time, Clark W. Griswold, in National Lampoon's Vacation. One of my personal favorites, War Games. Scarface. Many decades ago, when my wife first moved into my apartment, one of the first decorating changes she made was taking down my Scarface poster. There was also Tootsie, starring Dustin Hoffman, and one of the most intense films of all time, Cujo. There was Flashdance, Trading Places, and the big blockbuster for the year, Return of the Jedi. Now let's discuss 1984, which in my opinion is the greatest year in cinema history. The amount of good movies that came out in 84 is absolutely absurd. Here is a list of the top grossing movies from the year. This includes some of my all-time favorites in The Gremlins, Red Dawn, and Revenge of the Nerds. There were several successful movie franchises that started in 84, like Police Academy, Beverly Hills Cop, and The Terminator. O.J. Simpson was originally cast for the Terminator role until James Cameron changed his mind. There are many critically acclaimed films like Footloose, Purple Rain, Romancing the Stone, and The Natural. Not to mention cult classic 16 Candles, which was 37th in box office numbers for the year, and the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. The big award winner for the year was Terms of Endearment, which won 5 Academy Awards. All of these movies, and I haven't even mentioned the 3 blockbusters of the year, like the original Karate Kid, which is still relevant today with the Netflix series Cobra Kai, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, And the number one movie of 1984, the original Ghostbusters, which is one of the most popular films of all time. As you can see, 84 was absolutely loaded with good films, and in my opinion, the best movie year ever. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments. Now let's turn a page to 1985, which was another year loaded with classic movies. These were the days you can spend an entire day in the theaters just going to one movie to the next. Now, you might not have paid for all those movies, but that's another story. In 85, you could have went to a theater and all of these movies would be playing. Back to the Future, Rocky IV, which is my favorite Rocky, and an amazing soundtrack, Cocoon, The Goonies, The Breakfast Club, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Spies Like Us, family favorite Clue, and Teen Wolf. A lot of great movies on this list. 86 continued the strong run of blockbuster movies with the mega hit Top Gun, which also had an amazing soundtrack. Other popular movies from 86 were Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Amazing Crocodile Dundee, the hilarious Back to School, Aliens, The Color Purple, one of my wife's all-time favorites, The Money Pit, and Pretty in Pink. The hits just kept on coming in 87 with movies like Fatal Attraction, the first installment of Lethal Weapon, Platoon, Dirty Dancing, La Bamba, Full Metal Jacket, and Wall Street. (1988) saw the start of the Die Hard franchise and other classic movies such as Beetlejuice, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Coming to America, Good Morning Vietnam, and Rain Man, which came out in December of 88 and won Best Picture in 89. The 80s ended as strong as it started with hits like Batman, which is one of the most influential superhero movies of all time, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, When Harry Met Sally, Major League, Do the Right Thing, and in December of 89, to finish out the decade, the greatest Christmas movie ever came out, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. In my family, it's a tradition to watch this movie every Christmas Eve. As you can see, the 80s were loaded with great films from start to finish, and there were so many other movies that I didn't even mention. So I want to hear from you. What 80s movie that wasn't in this video would you have included? Also, what's your favorite 80s movie? Do you agree that this is the greatest film decade ever? Let me know in the comments. As always, I appreciate you letting an old man reminisce. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more fun videos.